There is a very good chance that the absolute worst suffering in your life right now is being caused by the one thing you are most proud of.
Oh, absolutely.
And that is the fact that you are right.
Yeah.
We spend so much of our time and energy, building these walls of certainty to keep the chaos of the world out. We curate this worldview that just makes sense to us.
Right. We build these mental structures to protect ourselves.
Exactly. But what if those very same structures, the ones keeping you safe and secure, are actually the walls of a prison you've locked yourself inside?
It's a deeply unsettling thought, honestly. I
Hmm.
mean, from the moment we are born, we are taught to seek security.
Yeah, we crave predictability.
We do.
Yeah.
And then we reach a point where we have to stop and ask if that carefully constructed security is actually, suffocating us.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because we are diving into a framework today that flips our understanding of certainty completely upside down.
It really does.
We are looking at a foundational essay by Xu Feng. It was published in July 2023, and it's titled, How to Break Out of Your Cognitive Boundaries.
A fantastic piece.
And our mission in this deep dive is to figure out how these invisible mental walls dictate absolutely everything, from the global movement of millions of people down to how you define your own family.
And more importantly, we're going to look at the incredibly uncomfortable key to tearing those walls down.
Yes. So what makes this framework so compelling to me is that it doesn't just dismiss all boundaries as inherently toxic.
Right. It recognizes that they serve a fundamental psychological purpose.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the human brain cannot process the infinite chaos of reality all at once, so it draws a line.
It has to.
Yeah, it creates a boundary around what it actually understands.
Right, and that leads to the central paradox of this whole concept. The premise here is that it's perfectly fine to live within your mental walls until old age.
Yeah, if you have a decent life,
Yeah. Exactly. If you're comfortable and content inside that space, you are essentially given permission to stay there. But if you feel miserable, if you feel stifled or oppressed by your life, you have to break out.
you have no other choice.
So my question is, why do we invest so heavily in building these walls in the first place if they possess this, latent ability to trap us?
Well, we build them for shelter. I mean, when you are young or when you're navigating a highly volatile environment, drawing a boundary around what you know to be true reduces your cognitive load.
It stops you from being completely overwhelmed.
Exactly. The problem is that life isn't static. As you grow, your environment changes, your capabilities change, and life demands new things from you.
And of all,
The wall doesn't move.
right, it doesn't move. So that initial shelter slowly transitions into a cage. And the real tragedy of human psychology is that we rarely notice the shelter has become a cage until the oxygen is almost gone. Oh, wow. And getting out of that cage requires a very specific action, doesn't it? I mean, it sounds simple on paper, but it is something that goes against almost every defensive instinct we have.
It requires you to admit when you are wrong.
Ah,
Yeah, stepping beyond a cognitive boundary is just impossible without that step.
which is agonizing.
Oh, it's terrible because your cognitive boundary is held together by the mortar of your own ego.
Right.
The boundary is entirely constructed out of the belief that your perspective is the correct one. If you maintain the stance that you're always right, you're just reinforcing the walls of your own confinement.
It's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this framework makes a very bold, sweeping claim about human misery. It suggests that the vast majority of suffering in this world is generated by people who are absolutely convinced they are right.
Wait, let me push back on that for a second.
Sure.
If I'm navigating a dense forest and I believe I'm walking north and I happen to be right about it, that certainty is what keeps me alive, right? It gets me out of the woods.
Sure, in a physical space.
But you're saying that in the landscape of the mind, planting a flag and saying, I am right, is actually the exact mechanism that gets me hopelessly lost.
Precisely. Because in the physical forest, north is an objective reality. A compass will confirm it regardless of how you feel.
Right.
But in the landscape of the mind, your north is entirely subjective. It is just your assumption about how the world works based on your, limited experiences.
Oh, I see.
What's fascinating here is that when you plant a flag in your own subjective reality and declare, I am right, your brain literally stops processing alternative information.
You just shut down.
You close off new pathways, you stop seeing nuance, you construct a wall.
Because you stop exploring. You think you've already found the destination.
Exactly. And this leads to a really tragic paradox we see all the time. People who are enduring immense hardship, people whose lives are actively falling apart will usually cling desperately to the belief that their perspective is the correct one.
Even when it's destroying them.
Yeah, they will suffer within the familiar confines of their mental prison, rather than endure the temporary ego death of admitting their cognitive map is flawed.
They would literally rather be right and miserable than wrong and free.
Think about the last genuinely stubborn argument you had. How much of your mental energy, your adrenaline, was spent just defending your wall,
Defending my rightness.
defending your rightness?
Yeah.
The moment you commit to being right, you've already lost. Because you have immediately shrunk your universe down to the exact dimensions of your current understanding. You've locked yourself in.
Man, that hits hard. So if this I'm right trap is that destructive on an individual level, it has to be absolutely catastrophic when scaled up to an entire culture.
Oh, it's massive.
Because we've talked about physical borders, but the most rigid walls aren't always on a map, right? They are the collective assumptions a society makes about how the world works.
Absolutely.
And this analysis uses two massive, contrasting cultural mindsets to illustrate this point.
Yes. Looking at collective cognitive boundaries really helps us understand why entire populations can either stagnate or thrive. And to demonstrate this, the framework first examines a traditional mindset deeply rooted in Chinese history.
And just to be clear for everyone listening, we are looking at this impartially as an example of how collective mental models function.
Right.
Whether you agree with the historical assessment or not, the mechanism it describes is just fascinating. The focus here is on the centuries-old anticipation of a wise ruler or an Eastern sage who will finally arrive to save the people and fix the system.
Yeah, and it's a profound example of a collective boundary. When a society operates under the assumption that salvation comes from a mythical, perfect individual at the top, they're drawing a strict boundary around their own agency.
They're outsourcing their problems.
Exactly. The critique in the text explicitly calls it sheer folly to rely on a mythical savior, because relying on this savior figure is a form of collective paralysis.
Because if you're waiting for someone else to fix it, you aren't fixing it yourself.
That's the underlying logic. This boundary prevents the culture from looking at alternative, systemic solutions. Instead of doing the difficult incremental work of solving problems through legality and procedures.
Which requires active, messy, collective participation, right?
Right. The boundary creates a passive waiting game. You don't build the legal infrastructure. You don't establish procedural justice. You just, well, wait for a better king.
It's like sitting in a leaking boat, and instead of grabbing a bucket, you just sit there waiting for a better captain to magically appear on deck.
That is a perfect analogy.
And this paralysis is immediately contrasted in the text with what is described as a massive modern cognitive breakthrough.
Right. It pivots to examine the Indian diaspora. Specifically, it highlights the modern mindset of change the country or immigrate. This is presented as the ultimate dismantling of a geographic and cultural boundary.
And the scale of this is just staggering. We are talking about 32 million Indians who have formally renounced their citizenship to seek opportunities abroad.
32 million.
32 million people who looked at the invisible boundary line of their birthplace and decided it wasn't going to be their ceiling. But I want to unpack the friction of that, because leaving everything you know isn't just buying a plane ticket. It is a violent tearing down of a mental wall.
It is an incredible psychological feat. I mean, the natural human inclination is to believe that you must succeed where you were born.
That your homeland is the designated arena for your life.
Exactly. So when you dismantle that boundary, the friction is immense. You're leaving your linguistic comfort zone, your cultural shorthand, your extended support networks. But the mechanism of this breakthrough is the realization that opportunity does not have a zip code.
Here's where it gets really interesting. This isn't just about geography, is it?
No, not at all.
It's about breaking a mental boundary that says, I must succeed where I was born. By stepping outside that boundary, they secured a better future for their descendants. And the results are undeniably global. The analysis points to Sajid Javid serving as a high-level leader in the UK government, even noting him in the context of prime ministerial potential.
Right, and it highlights the high-ranking executives of Indian origin who are currently running American tech giants like Microsoft and Google.
Yeah, but the truly fascinating evidence isn't just in the boardrooms, right? It's on the ground.
Yes, the breadth of this boundary breaking is observed over decades of global travel by the author. The accounts detail seeing this diaspora in Zimbabwe back in 1993, where nearly half the shops were run by individuals of Indian origin.
Wow, 1993. And the text notes it stretches across South Africa, Mozambique, Angola, Ethiopia, Botswana, and Tanzania.
And it doesn't stop in Africa.
Yeah.
The observations track the exact same entrepreneurial presence in Pacific Island nations like Fiji and Vanuatu around 2016.
Right.
By 2017, it's visible in Canada running hotels, managing retail giants like Walmart.
It's everywhere. If those individuals had remained trapped inside the cognitive boundary that dictated they must stay in their homeland, none of this wealth, opportunity, or global influence would have materialized.
None of it.
By enduring the discomfort of stepping outside the familiar, they didn't just relocate, they opened up a vast realm of life.
Which really forces you to stop and wonder how many geographic limitations we just passively accept because it's where we happen to be planted.
Totally. But here's where this gets really intimate. Because if we connect this to the bigger picture, these massive geographic shifts are powered by the exact same mental mechanics we use to make our most intimate daily choices.
Yes. The framework shifts from physical borders to personal ones, starting with family.
Right.
Most of us operate under a very rigid cognitive boundary regarding family,
Mm-hmm.
the idea that relatives are strictly the people connected to us by blood.
Yeah.
This is a foundational wall for almost every human society.
But wait, redefining family sounds great in theory, but blood ties carry massive biological and evolutionary weight. Can we really just override millions of years of human evolution and treat a complete stranger with the same devotion we offer a biological relative?
I know it sounds extreme.
Isn't that boundary there for a reason?
Well, the boundaries certainly evolved for a reason. Selection is a real biological concept. But the argument here is that in the modern world, strictly adhering to that biological boundary severely limits your scope of life.
How so?
If your emotional and practical safety net is restricted purely to the genetic lottery, you only get a handful of true allies. The mechanism of breaking this boundary involves a conscious psychological override.
And how does that actually work in practice?
It means making the active choice to treat anyone who is deeply close and intimate with you as family, utterly irrespective of their region, their race, their social status, or their position.
Oh, I see.
The analysis includes a very personal reflection on this, describing an inner circle composed of several individuals who were once strangers but are now treated entirely as kin.
And the payoff for breaking that biological wall.
The resulting care, loyalty, and assistance received from this chosen family is sometimes more effective, more genuine than what one might experience from biological children.
Wow.
When you drop the boundary of blood, your potential for profound human connection becomes limitless. You are no longer stuck with the family you were assigned. You curate a family based on mutual devotion and shared values.
That is a huge paradigm shift. You are expanding the emotional safety net on your own terms.
Exactly.
And the same concept of challenging the default path applies just as heavily to how we view our careers.
So very much so.
It's the boundary between being an employee and being an entrepreneur.
Right. It frames this as two fundamentally different cognitive perspectives that shape your entire trajectory, starting from the moment you enter the education system.
Right. The text breaks it down into the graduate and find a job boundary versus the graduate and start a business mindset. It's like playing a video game where you think the only way to level up is by hoarding gold or sticking to the main quest, finding a job.
I like that.
But breaking the boundary is realizing it's an open world game. You can build your own alliances, your relatives, and invent your own quests, which is entrepreneurship.
That analogy perfectly captures the underlying mechanics. If your cognitive boundary dictates that success means getting hired, your brain optimizes for what is described here as formalities.
Formalities?
Yes. You focus on resume building, conforming to corporate culture, passing standardized interviews, and fitting perfectly into a pre-existing mold.
You're optimizing to be selected.
Which is a passive state.
Exactly.
But if you break that boundary and adopt the entrepreneurial mindset, your brain stops caring about formalities and becomes hyper-focused on practicality.
How things actually work.
Exactly. How do things actually function? Where is the friction in the market?
Right.
How do I actively create value from scratch? It literally changes your taste in life. You stop asking for permission from authority figures and start looking directly at problems.
But if we are talking about careers and value, we have to talk about the thickest, most impenetrable wall most of us build around our daily lives.
A money trap.
The money trap, the cognitive boundary that dictates without money, you cannot get things done.
It is a massive boundary.
We all know people who live their entire lives inside that specific cell. Every decision, every relationship, every hour of the day is quantified.
And the critique of this boundary in the essay is scathing. It suggests that when a person's entire operating system revolves around capital, their thoughts and actions inevitably become vulgar and superficial.
But why? What is the actual psychological mechanism that makes it vulgar? It's
Right.
not just that they have money, it's how the money changes their perception, right?
Yes. When you view the world purely through the lens of transactions, your brain literally stops processing intrinsic value.
Yeah.
You train your neural pathways to constantly ask, what is the return on investment here? Rather than, what is the inherent meaning of this?
Right.
By optimizing solely for commerce and utility, you blind yourself to anything that cannot be put on a ledger.
You know the price of everything and the value of nothing.
And that is how the wall gets built. This fixation causes people to view the world with a sense of contempt, ignoring the most profound blessings of human existence.
Yeah.
The framework explicitly lists what this boundary blocks out: love, sexuality, morality, justice, spirituality, and the Tao.
And for those who might not be familiar with the concept in this context, the Tao generally refers to the underlying natural flow and order of the universe. It's the intuitive harmony of life.
Exactly. It is the subtle connective tissue of reality, which you completely miss if you're only looking for price tags.
So true.
By believing money is the exclusive engine for action, you literally lose the capacity to perceive the deeper mechanics of a meaningful life. You become spiritually impoverished regardless of how much wealth you've accumulated within your walls.
Wow. Okay, so we've dismantled the need to be right. We've looked at the borders of nations, the definition of family, the structure of our careers, and the illusion of money.
We've covered a lot.
If our cognitive boundaries dictate all of those massive domains, there's really only one ultimate frontier left to explore.
The boundary of life and death. This is where the analysis strips away everything else and looks at the very foundation of existence.
The idea that how we view death isn't just a biological fact, but another cognitive wall we construct.
The assertion here is that believing death is the absolute definitive end of life is a boundary. And operating strictly within that belief prevents a person from ever finding what is described as the door to heaven.
And whether you interpret that door in a strictly theological sense or as a metaphor for profound peace and transcendence, the core psychological mechanism remains the same.
Yes. If your foundational assumption is that existence is purely material, strictly finite, and inevitably terminating in nothingness, you back yourself into a very small, anxiety-ridden psychological corner.
You construct a ceiling on the meaning of your own consciousness.
Which naturally leads into a very delicate but incredibly vital discussion about the extremes of human despair.
Right. The text addresses suicide, and it frames this ultimate tragedy purely through the lens of cognitive boundaries. How does this framework explain that absolute level of hopelessness?
It explains that extreme despair occurs when individuals become so completely trapped within their cognitive boundaries that they literally cannot perceive a single reason, avenue, or opportunity to continue living.
It isn't that the world is actually run out of possibilities.
No, it's that their internal walls have closed in so tightly and grown so thick that the room has gone entirely pitch black.
It's a crisis of perception. The lack of options feels completely real and absolute to the person standing inside the wall, even if 1,000 doors exist just on the other side of it.
The perceived reality is absolute to them. That is the danger of a rigid cognitive boundary. But this is also where the antidote is found. The realization needed at that critical, agonizing moment of despair is the understanding that the dead end is an illusion created by the mind.
If they could just find a crack in that specific mental wall, if they could just momentarily suspend the belief that their hopeless perspective is the absolute truth, what happens?
The illusion shatters. The text points out that if they step outside that boundary, they would suddenly realize, wow, life's path is so vast.
The vastness didn't magically appear. It was always there. It was just obscured by the architecture of their own certainty. So what does this all mean? It seems like the author is saying that hopelessness isn't an accurate reflection of reality. Hopelessness is just a reflection of how small we've built our internal walls.
That's a great way to put it.
Is the ultimate message here that reality is always bigger than our perception of it?
This raises an important question. We constantly treat our perceptions as undeniable facts.
Yeah.
We defend our walls because we think they're the world. This entire framework is a warning that our perceptions are usually just the wallpaper inside a prison cell. Stepping beyond cognitive boundaries isn't just a clever strategy for getting a promotion or making more money or even immigrating to a new country.
No, it's much bigger than that.
It is quite literally a matter of survival. Dismantling your own certainty is the only way to step into the vast world.
It is a complete paradigm shift and honestly, a massive relief. We have covered incredible ground today.
We really have.
We started by looking at how letting go of the desperate, exhausting need to be right is the first swing of the hammer against your self-made prison.
Exactly.
We saw how entire societies can be paralyzed by passively waiting for systemic salvation, while millions of individuals change the globe simply by refusing to accept the boundary of their birthplace.
And we brought that exact same mechanism down to the most intimate levels of human life, realizing that true family requires breaking the boundary of blood. Recognizing that building value in the world requires breaking the boundary of just being an employee, and understanding that a life obsessively quantified by money blinds you to love, justice, and the deeper harmony of the Tao.
And finally, realizing that even our darkest moments of despair are often just symptoms of a cognitive wall built a little too tight. You break the wall, and the vast path of life reappears. It puts the agency entirely back in your hands.
He does.
You built the walls to feel safe, which means you hold the exact tools required to tear them down.
Precisely.
And that brings us to a final thought for you to carry with you today. We've spent this entire deep dive talking about how liberating it is to knock down these mental walls. We've talked about the vastness on the other side.
Yeah.
But consider this. If you were to suddenly demolish the biggest, thickest cognitive boundary in your life right now, the core belief that is keeping you the most safe and predictable, what is the very first, terrifyingly new truth you would be forced to look at?
That is a scary thought.
And more importantly, are you brave enough to keep your eyes open to it? Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning your certainties, keep looking for the cracks in the walls, and we will catch you next time.